Hello, I'm Tim Saunders. I'm the Development Director of the Cogworks, and my session straight after lunch is going to be about Umbraco load balancing. Now, obviously, we've just had some nice focaccia sandwiches, so to try and get us through the post-lunch fog, this is not so much talking at you. We'll probably open it up to have lots of questions about load balancing, any problems that you're having. If anybody is already load balancing, what's worked for them. I'm going to go through one possible way of doing it. And the thing with Umbraco, there's more than one way that you can set up load balancing. So there's probably other people in here, if you have set it up before, who may have done it in a different way. So if you've done it in a different way and want to share it with other people, then feel free to chip in. Adam has a microphone in his hand, he's at the back. So if you sort of raise your hand when we get to it, and he'll come over and hand you the mic, and you can talk about what you've been doing or whatever. So hopefully we'll keep the energy level going, and we won't all doze off in the nice warm conference centre. Anyway, so we'll go through it. It's probably quite a high level what I'm going to talk about, nothing specific, just about what's already there inside Umbraco. So I guess the first question, is anybody here actually load balancing at the moment, their Umbraco installations? So, yeah, a reasonable amount. Okay, is there any people here looking to load balance their Umbraco? Okay, so a few people here. Has anybody here tried to load balance their Umbraco and not succeeded? Oh, a few. Cool. Well, we're all here to help those people who may be struggling with load balancing, because I know there are some people here who've made it work and have got it working successfully. We've made it work successfully as well, so hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions and get something up and running for you guys. So, leading on from that, what's the first question? Can Umbraco be load balanced? What's the answer? No. Yeah, no? Surely yes. Second question. Is it easy? No. Yes. Sort of. It can be quite easy, but there are things that you need to bear in mind. And with anything that you're doing in terms of infrastructure and important things like load balancing, which is how your kind of site gets served to the world, you're going to need to think about it, and you're going to need to plan, and you're going to need to test. And testing is very important when you're doing load balancing, because you need to know that what you're doing and what you're putting in place is not having a detrimental effect on how you serve your site, on your throughput, on how many visitors can come and see, how many requests per second you can do. So it's important to, particularly if you're going from a single server setup and you want to just put in load balancing, test what you currently have. Is this the best solution? And I guess the question is, do you really want to load balance? Is it something you want to do? There's lots of Umbraco sites out there which are running on single servers, which are working absolutely fine. And if you have cloud servers, they can be vertically scaled. You can add new processors, you can add more hard drive space, you can put more RAM in. Make sure that load balancing is the solution to your problem. Ask yourself, why do I want to load balance? What benefit is it to my customers? Is it going to be better response times? Is it going to be, more reliability, high availability? Does it mean my site's not going to go off when I'm updating things, when the app pool restarts, that sort of thing? So is load balancing going to give you the things that you want? And hopefully, yes, load balancing is, reasonably easy to set up and might be your answer. But if it's not, then don't bother doing it. Which sounds kind of obvious, but some people kind of go, well, I must have it load balanced. I've got to have it. That's best practice. I've got to have some load balance, when actually maybe that's not the solution for you. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about load balancing and how we've set it up in the past. So this is just one way of doing it. It's a high level. It's the classic technical presentation, boxes and lines, build up of all the elements of load balancing. And we'll maybe talk about some of the things you need to consider at each point, and the steps that you need to take to get to load balancing. So we normally start off, hello, I'm a server. Single server, this is your classic Umbraco setup. It's just a single server, it's got the database on it, IAS, all the media, examine, it's super simple, and we talked before, you can upscale the processor or RAM or whatever. But eventually you might want to get to the point where you want to load balance for the reason we talked about before. So what's the first thing you might need to do? Okay, first thing you might need to do is take the database off of that server. So now we have two servers. You have a database server and we have a web server. And it's good to take the database server off because we can now start optimizing for what those two different things do, because a database server is different from a web server. A web server would need to be optimized for requests, and the database server needs to be optimized for data, so that may have more RAM on the database server, whatever. So now we already have some more flexibility in how we're setting things up, and that also gives us the flexibility to add more servers in. But there are other things that we need to consider, particularly with Umbraco, and those things are things like media, examine indexes, things that need to be shared by your eventual web servers at the top level. Now, our preferred approach is to use a SAN to store those files. Now, there are, as I say, there are more than one way of doing this. What we tend to do is on our SAN we would store the media and the examine indexes. Now examine supports out of the box indexing in this format, so you can just point say your IAS at the examine folder on your SAN, and it will just support that out of the box even if you've got several servers all pointing to the same place. So that's quite useful, and that's quite an easy way of setting things up. The next thing we add in is obviously multiple web servers, and to do that we're going to need some kind of load balancer. Now how you do your load balancer, there's obviously Windows load balancer, you can use network load balancer I think it's called, or you can have hardware load balancing. There's lots of options there as well. But now we can have multiple servers, and because we've got the database out on a separate server and we've got the SAN serving the media items, we can now add in servers. Now the way that we do it is we have obviously builds and automated processes, which in fact the session straight after this one, Anthony's going to talk about some of our automation processes. Say hello, Anthony. A little wave at the back. We're going to talk about some of those automation processes, and what those automation processes mean is we can provision servers with a website reasonably easily. You know, it's probably not one click, but it's pretty easy to do. And because we store all our website files, so things like XSLT, C#, bin, whatever, in our source control, we just build out to the servers that we need to, so we can add as many servers in as we like. And because we've abstracted away the media and examine issues and that sort of thing onto a SAN, that gives us much more flexibility to add those servers in and out as we go. Now the next thing we need to consider is editing environment. Now obviously when we had multiple servers there, which one of those is going to be doing the Umbraco editing? Well, one way of doing it, you can just bless one of those servers and say, you are my Umbraco editing server, and I'm going to set up a URL, say something like edit.mydomain.com, and it will always go to there, and that's how you'll edit your Umbraco website. Now that's an okay way of doing it, but what you might want to do is, because obviously that will be a content entry server and also a web server as well, so if we were looking for the performance, we might go, okay, well let's not have an editing environment there. Let's take the editing environment out. We can move it behind our firewall and use something like Courier to push changes up to the web heads there. Or we could still have that environment there, but just hive that one off to the side slightly, so and not have it publicly accessible, but it can still push out to those servers, so it's still in the same place, not behind your own firewall, but on the live servers, but it's just blessed as the editing server, but nobody can get to it from the front end, public type thing. So there's a few different ways of configuring that, and it's going to depend, as always, as I said, it takes some thought and some planning on what you want to do and what the benefits will be of any particular setup that you go for. Anyway, so that's probably a reasonably common if you set it up with the SAN set up for the Umbraco load balancing. Now you'll see that there's a reasonable amount of hardware there. So we've got 2 web servers, database server, a SAN, load balancer, and there are other ways of doing it with using less hardware. But you have to start asking yourself the question, why do I want to load balance if I'm worried about having multiple bits of hardware? I'm going, I've got too many servers. Well, you're going to have several servers, you're load balancing. So, do you really want to scrimp in that area? Is that an area that you really want to sort of save on? Other options of load balancing Umbraco. I had a little bit of a chat with a few people before I did this presentation, just today, and just asked how do you do it? How are you doing Umbraco load balancing? And in fact, the two options I had on my slide were said to me, and they said, okay, one person said, oh, well, I replicate the files between the servers. They use basically dynamic file replication, so rather than having a SAN, they literally copy the files between all the servers and have individual websites that way. And another person stored the entire website on a SAN. So effectively, your IIS points to the SAN, and that's where not just the media and exam indexes, but the whole website itself is stored on the SAN. Now, we've tried that and not really been very successful getting it up and running. We've been successful storing the media and examine on SAN, that was no problem at all, but with storing the whole IIS on there, although we try to follow the instructions that are on the wiki, we seem to have some problems with net BIOS limits and things like that, and the only option seemed to be the only fix for that was to turn it off, which is I wasn't mad keen with doing strange registry hacks and the hope that that would fix that issue. So if anybody has successfully done that and hasn't had to do bizarre registry hacks, then I'll be absolutely ecstatic to know how you did it, because it was that stopped us. So anyway, so that was a really quick sort of run through. I've probably rattled on rather quickly because I tend to talk fast when I'm presenting. So I've probably left you with some questions and that sort of thing. But anyway, so what I'd kind of like to do now is have a bit of a question time about load balancing. You can ask me questions. You can just generally make comments about load balancing Umbraco. And here's some things you might want to say. You don't. How could you improve? What would improve load balancing Umbraco? Because we've got some cool people here. It would be really good to get some feedback from people who are using it in the wild and sort of going, oh yeah, it was great, but there was a really major issue, or it would be easier if it did everything for me. I just pushed a big red button and it provisioned servers in Amazon and it was wonderful. And how would you do it differently? That's that approach, the SAN approach, the file replication. Are there any other ways that I don't know about that might be worth sharing with everybody here? Does anyone have any questions to start off with? Yes?
What version of Umbraco would you start using for load balancing? I mean, it didn't used to work very well in the earlier versions before. At what point did you consider it kind of worthy of load balancing?
Well, we've pretty much only load balanced from 4.7 onwards. Previous versions of that, not particularly because we didn't think it was ready for load balancing, we just didn't have a need to do it at that point. So 4.7 onwards is where we've load balanced it, and it's been, seems to be okay. Fingers crossed, I need a bit of wood I can touch. A superstitious development, that's not good, is it? 452, Anthony. Okay. Yes.
What files do I need to stick in my SAN, or if I'm replicating between servers, like which folders do I need to share between?
Okay, yeah, well, your media folder, and we also put the examiner index folder, which is inside app data. I can't remember exactly.
Doing everything in app data, not the temp directory, and the XML cache file as well?
Yeah, we don't tend to put the XML cache file in there. We let the distributed calls from Umbraco handle the refreshing of that.
Yeah, is there a reason why I need to go do that rather than replicating that file? So I couldn't get that to work. So.
You couldn't get the dynamic AC.
No, so I just copied it.
Yeah, interestingly, we were the other way round. We started doing the way that you had to put the XML cache, but then we had cache invalidation problems because it wasn't updating the content because it didn't know it needed to.
I mean, is there a reason why it's preferable to do one than the other, or?
Well, the only way I've managed to get it to work is to actually use the distributed calls and not store the XML file on the SAN.
Whatever we can get working.
Yeah, well, yeah, indeed. What works for you? But yeah. But that's the way that it's worked for us.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Any more questions? Anyone want to share? Oh, yes, plenty. Go on.
Don't know if you're going to cover this later on, but it's about using Umbraco on a load balance environment and Courier. Because usually when you go all the way to have load balancing, is because you have a fairly extensive setup where you have staging server, where you want people to try things and then publish. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And we couldn't quite work together, Courier and Umbraco on load balancing on a 452 installation. It actually worked for about 1 hour and then completely lost synchronization. It was a massive disaster. It took a whole weekend and a lot of embarrassment to get back from. And so, because I think the main problem is we have load balancing, as we understand, is implemented by using distributed publishing.
Yep.
You have distributed nodes, but then if you use Courier, essentially Courier needs to take over that. And there was something that wasn't quite right, and the synchronization was completely lost. So is that something that's addressed now, for example, in Courier 2 and the latest versions of Umbraco?
Okay, well, I can't answer any specific Courier questions about versions. Per Plough-Hansen is your man for Courier stuff, but I will just open that question out actually slightly wider to anybody who is already doing load balancing. Is anybody using Courier with their load balancing setup? We've got a few people who are. And how is it working for one of you? Yeah?
Yeah, we had the same sort of issues that you had when we were using Courier 2.1. And we're running Umbraco 4.7.1 at the moment. And we found when we upgraded to 2.5 version of Courier, those problems were fine. So if you're not running 2.5, try that in your first instance.
So have you tried upgrading Courier? Is that something that you've tried? Okay, give that one a go then. Any more questions? Yep, a bit further back.
So when you mentioned SAN,
yes.
In what way are you referencing it? Have you got a UNC path? Because we've got a NetApp SAN within our environment, but the systems team just tell us that you can't attach 2 drives to 2 virtual hosts. It doesn't work. But I mean, are you referencing it as a UNC path that's situated on that SAN, or are you attaching drives in other ways?
Well, the UNC path can also have the issue I was talking about NetBIOS limits. That's one of the issues that we've had with using UNC paths in IAS, pointing to a SAN or a NAS. You get the NetBIOS limit can be exceeded, particularly if you store the whole website on the SAN. If you just limit it to media, and if you've got a lot of media, a lot of folders, then the file system watcher, I think, tries to set up handles to all of those files, and that's when it starts complaining, for us anyway. Obviously there are some registry hacks you can do to prevent that, or you can attach your SAN in another way. So rather than using it as almost like a NAS, use it as a proper SAN, which is local file storage, so something like iSCSI, and mount it properly rather than having a sort of a file path like that.
Okay.
Is there anyone else had any problems with? Yes, Nick.
No, sorry, I don't have any problems.
No, you're just putting your hand up, just raising your hand in excitement.
No, I have another question. Did you want to?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Why do you put your examine indexes on the SAN? Because we're doing everything that you recommend in the first scenario, except that our examine indexes are local.
But we found that works the best when we're trying to keep everything up to date, because it means that if any content changes occur, it just goes out to the SAN, and then the index is updated for all instances of the website. If you have local ones, I'm not sure how they would re-index, how they would know content had changed.
So they don't re-index off a distributed call?
I think they'll probably re-index the content, but it depends how your examine's set up and what it's set up to index. If you've got other stuff in your examine indexes, I'm not sure that would get picked up as well. It would only be the Umbraco stuff that would get picked up. And as we do the stuff you need to watch Ismail's session on Examine for all the exciting things we do with Examine. We have quite a lot of stuff in Examine and use that for indexing all sorts of things. And obviously you end up with having to do custom stuff for all of those things as well. So if we have one instance, that seems to work better for us.
Cheers.
No worries. Oh yes, yeah, right at the back. It's a very long room, this, for running up and down. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, just has anyone tried Umbraco with Windows Azure websites? I know there used to be an accelerator for Azure web roles, but with websites, is it working?
Well, I've never tried that. I've used the Azure accelerator, which worked up to a certain point. It was okay. It seemed to be a bit flaky of file replication between Blob and the web servers occasionally, but we ran quite a big website off of it, and it seemed to be pretty good. It's a nice, easy way of getting things done. I've not done the other way. Has anybody here used Azure for their Umbraco? No. Well, there we are. There's your answer. Oh no, hang on. Yes, you have. How did it go?
I haven't used it to distribute for multiple servers.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, we did a site on Azure. Obviously, you can't have your editing environment because it uses round-robin load balancing. It doesn't go back to the same set, and Umbraco backend does very, very strange things if you do that. Any more questions or things you want to share about load balancing? No? All good, excellent. Is it a bit clearer, load balancing? Do we feel more comfortable with it? Is it something that, yeah?
When should you be considering load balancing? At what point?
Sorry, I can't.
When should you be considering load balancing? What point?
Well, I mean that comes down to what's your requirement for load balancing? What is it that's prompting you to put it in? Now, it may be that you want to put in some level of tolerance. So if a server falls over, another one is there to take the strain. It might be that you want it for the additional ability to serve more visitors. And it's a question of what do you want it for? What do you want load balancing for? And if it's for sort of high availability, I never want my website to go down, it's a much more complicated setup than it would be if I just want some more performance. I need to make sure I have several servers serving the load because I can only handle so many requests in a single server instance. If you're trying to set high availability, you need to consider your whole infrastructure, not just the web server part of it. It's not just like adding a couple of extra web servers in. When you put a database server in, well, what happens if that falls over? You need to try and eliminate those single points of failure in your architecture. So it's going to depend exactly where you want to get to, at which point you go think, yeah, load balancing is right for me. Often with cloud hosting, you can scale your power of your server up and down. They've got pretty robust infrastructure, things like Amazon, whatever. So do you really need to go to load balancing? Is it something that you should be considering? Well, that's going to be down to your exact requirements and why did you start thinking about, do I need load balancing? Hopefully that's not gone round the question and answered it. Got a bit politician there. Anyone else got anything they want to share or talk about? Yes? Yeah. Quick, Anthony, come on.
Hi there. This is actually also perhaps directed towards you, Pierre, because I'm wondering...
He's looking very shifty now.
You better come in here now. I'm wondering if you have a scenario where you have a staging environment and you want to use Courier to push out into one server, where everybody knows that works. But could it be possible to use Courier to push to a multitude of servers, and then we didn't have to think about synchronizing servers and all that shebang? Would that be possible?
Yeah, it would be possible, but you would still have to do the deployment twice. It doesn't automatically support that you deploy to multiple servers. I think the idea with deploying to one server was to use load balancing and then just deploy to one server that would then load balance all files and deploy the cache, etc. to all the different servers. So you use the load balancing in Umbraco and just deploy to one server at a time.
But could Courier not take care of deploying it to a multitude of servers and then we didn't have to think about it?
Yeah, it could, but it's it's still slower than actually getting load balancing servers to synchronize with each other. You still have a lot of overhead with Courier because it does a lot of synchronization and checking if data exists already and back and forth. So it's slower compared to having servers synchronize their database and files.
Just a quick question on Courier, not particularly directed to you, Per. Is anybody here automating Courier as part of their builds? Oh, well, I know you are, Nicholas. and Aileen as well. Okay, cool. And so still 3 people. How did you find that? Just while Per's here. Was that easy to set up?
We have a problem that when we release, we get 100% uptime. So we use Courier to release, but we can't have 100% uptime because of that. So I don't know if there's a way we could set up load balancing.
Sorry,
so that
Per,
we
I've dragged you into it.
Yeah, it's okay. Sorry. Thank you for dragging me into this. So you have an issue. You can't keep uptime when you deploy with Courier.
We basically need 100% uptime, but then we need to be able to update our servers, and we use Courier to release all the code. But
it's nearly impossible, I would say, because of the underlying tech that is in Courier. You do a data deployment in a big transaction, and that transaction will stop the database from responding because it locks the affected tables. So no matter what you do, you can't get around the fact that you're running in a transaction. You could add a setting that says don't do this in a transaction, and that would keep the database alive, but that would also make your data crash if something happens along the way that kind of kills the entire process, and then you'd have often data in there somewhere. So I think if you need 100% uptime, you would still need to have 2 live environments basically. So you have one live environment that you keep synchronized with another one, then you deploy to the inactive one, and then you switch them over with the DNS setting, for example. So that would be the only way you could keep it up 100%, because there is no way around it when you have DLLs and you have data synchronizing.
Cool. Thank you, Per. Sorry about that.
I'll just sit here.
Yeah, you just sit there. I'll direct any questions to you. Okay. Any more questions or anything else anyone wants to say or share? Yes.
Which one?
Oh, 2. Yes.
Yeah, just back to put Per again. If you're
sorry, Per.
Sorry, Per.
I've stitched you right up.
If Courier is only used for pushing content as opposed to DLLs and anything like that, would that then become an issue about uptime?
Well, it still would, but that depends on how you manage your caching, basically. So if you can set up your caching so you would not require to access the database, then your site will keep on running just fine. It's only if it actually needs to fetch something from the database that it will stall. And only in case the running transaction actually affects some of the tables that you affect. It's all based on the way the SQL Server handles the transaction, basically. So if you deploy something that is in CMS templates table, for example, and you then have a request on your website that needs data from that table for some reason, then the database will not reply on any requests until that transaction is actually closed. So that is why your site will stop responding.
Just over there. Oh, no, we're going to have a fight over the microphone.
How about web farm framework? Can we use that?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Who's the question for?
I'm assuming it's for me. Okay. You can sit down again, Per. Thank you.
Sorry, it's about load balancing with the web farm framework, because then the server will also try and keep synchronizing things.
Yeah, I've not used it, so I don't know. I don't know. Okay, but it sounds like it could be an interesting thing to look at.
Try it out, those
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because part of the reason I wanted to just do this session is, although there is one page on the wiki about load balancing, and it's very good, there's not really much more information. There is a couple of Umbraco TV videos, covering the basics of distributed calls. But I just thought it'd be worth, trying to get more information and knowledge out there, and maybe sort of upgrading the wiki articles so there's a bit more real-world stuff in there as well, rather than you could do it this way or that way. Some experiences that other people have had. So hopefully after this, I'll try and put some extra documentation on the wiki as well that other people have had on. So is there anything you want to see in there, then feel free. Sorry, yes, we have another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if other people have had problems just publishing in initial publishing as opposed to republishing, a page that's already there. In terms of getting the data from one server to the other server. It just seems as though in our company we can only publish to one server, and that's working, but it's not the other server it's the content's not moving over to.
That's interesting. I can't say I've ever seen that. Sometimes in your distributed calls, if you don't, not sometimes, if you don't have the existing, you need to have all of the servers, so including the publishing server as well. They all need to be listed in there. You can't just have the two that you have. It has to have everyone. So that may be part of the issue, or have a look at maybe the DNS settings of those. Can it actually get to that server? But you say it's only on initial publish rather than on repo. Yeah. So if you republish
the very first publish, yeah.
Yeah. I've not seen that personally. So that would be interesting to try and work out what might be the problem there, because that might be because there seems to be sort of issues. I've had a look on our Umbraco and the forum, and there does seem to be issues occasionally with people setting up their load balancing, and it would be good to get a bit of a knowledge pool together to try and solve some of these issues that people come up with, at least in some kind of wiki article or something.
So where's the best place to look for solutions to something like that?
Well, you can ask a question on our Umbraco. If anyone in the room also had that problem and solved it, has anybody ever seen that problem? Nope.
Permissions. We've had similar problems publishing across servers, but then we resolve that by setting up the correct permissions on the folders. So it might be something to do with permissions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it needs a bit of investigation, that one, to see what it might be. Yes.
Hi, Tim. So just in regards to our environment, we're looking at the Amazon Cloud auto-scaling horizontally. Yep. Now, we've sorted out the file system aspects, so the media. Now, what we're looking at doing now is actually having the servers register centrally at a location so that they know where to notify the other servers to republish. Yep. And my question is, has anyone written any load balancing provider or equivalent piece of code that prevents Umbraco from loading the server list from the config?
From the config, so you can get it from So
you get it from a service, a provider, some other alternate location that we can set up a registration for when a server comes online.
Yeah.
It starts up, when Umbraco starts, it automatically registers itself as available for publish requests.
I don't know of anyone who's doing that, but it sounds like an interesting project. And should you wish to open source that would be marvellous.
It's not technically possible to do right now.
Is it not technically? Okay.
Not from the configuration standpoint, but it's not hard to implement.
Yeah. So it's possible, but not.
It's a pull request.
Yeah. Okay, so you got to modify the core.
Yeah, you got to modify the core and the way it does configuration.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess the question then is: there's no interface or anything. You can just use dependency injection to swap out the component that loads the config?
No, there's nothing in there right now. It just reads directly from the config file. So there's no path to switch out right now.
On all servers.
Okay.
How do you put it in the online?
Super. Okay. Well, we're a little bit over the half an hour now. So any more questions? Just any last question before I? Nope. All done. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone.